Hello and welcome everyone to Immunefi's first community bug hunt. This is Jonah from Immunefi, and I'm pleased to present Carl Farterson, a smart contract pro, to show us how the pros do their bug hunting. And the way this session is going to work is Carl will be streaming from 11 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time to 2:30 Pacific Daylight Time with a 30-minute break at noon. So we recommend that everyone here also pull up some code on their end and start hunting while Carl is doing his thing, and you can ask questions and participate in the chat. But before we get to it, some ground rules first. The same rules on our Discord apply here in the chat. Please be respectful, don't spam, etc. I don't want to ban, but I will ban. So just letting you guys know. If you another point, if you think you found a bug, please don't reveal it. Instead, begin the disclosure process by creating an account on Immunefi and submitting the bug responsibly. That's what we're all about. That's the purpose of Immunefi, responsible bug disclosure. Carl will be the main streamer here, but we can turn on screen sharing for individual people if that would be useful at some point. Otherwise, I'm super excited. We will be, I think, recording this to release to our YouTube channel. And again, thanks to Carl for joining us. Carl, why don't you give our community a little bit of background on yourself, and then you can get started.
Sure. Hey everyone, Carl here. So a little background on me. Got into crypto in 2017, more on the trading and data science side, as I was formerly a data scientist. And then back in 2019, 2020, started getting more deep into Solidity development. So I took the Consensus Developer Bootcamp back in 2018 and realized there was a huge need in the space for Solidity auditors, as developers aren't going to keep waiting to launch their projects. And auditors, as we know, have a huge backlog and it's extremely expensive, all that jazz. And so 2019, 2020, started getting deep into audits. So my method of madness was just reviewing a shit ton of audits out there, whether it's CertIC, QuantStamp, Consensus Diligence, you name it. And I wanted to become an auditor at Consensus Diligence, but didn't have any formal auditing experience. So I didn't get the role. And I still wanted to audit. So what I did was I just tweeted out that I would audit a couple of projects for free, and just to get some experience. I ended up being able to review some really awesome projects in the space that are led by a couple different DAOs. And kind of a side note, one of the projects that I reviewed, I ended up doing some paid work for them after, and was able to help them safely migrate over 100,000 DAI into some new contracts. So that was kind of cool, seeing the progression from reviewing their contracts to actually helping them. But so after I reviewed these couple projects, I reached out to Consensus again, and they decided to bring me in for a couple months as a technical writer. So I worked alongside their audit team and helped give out some of the reports for a couple months. And this was in the fall/winter of this past year. While that was happening, I realized I really enjoy building. And so I started picking up a few different Solidity projects along the way. So currently I have a couple of different projects. So I'll share some of the links. So these are a couple projects that I have been actively contributing to for the last couple months. And while I've been doing that, I've been really wondering how we could improve audits and reviews and getting code improved as a whole for the Solidity and Ethereum ecosystem. So what I decided to do was, just a couple months ago, I think I started in February. So yeah, I created a best practitioners review team. which I made through the Gitcoin Kernel, which is an accelerator program for people in Web3. And with the best practicers, our goal is to have a lightweight review of very early stage projects before they launch, to apply common best practices, where some examples of best practices would be good documentation, which is NatSpec, as well as some diagrams to show the flow of contract usage. Testing, as testing is extremely important, as it kind of shows the expected usage of these contracts, and it gives you a narrative of how these contracts would be used, stuff like that. And ultimately, this will give early developers experience reviewing projects without having to become a full-blown auditor. So that documentation is public. So it is github.com/best practices. Let me see if there's a hyphen on it. There's not. Okay. Oh, there is. Cool. So when it comes to this team, I'm still kind of taking my time in developing it and formalizing our process. So for the last kernel, we reviewed 2 different projects. One of the projects we reviewed, the first one is called Tonic Finance. And shortly after we reviewed Tonic Finance, which is a project, a rebalancing project, like a DeFi project built by one developer, his code base ended up being acquired for about $1.5 million. So very cool to see that a project, that the very first project we reviewed, ended up having such good success afterward. And so, yeah, website doesn't even exist in terms of the documentation on how it'll work. I'm still kind of taking my time on that. So the next Gitcoin kernel is coming up in a couple weeks. And so through that, we will be offering 4 different reviews for people in the kernel. So if you are in or will be in the Gitcoin kernel or have been in the past, you'll be more than welcome to join for this kind of beta version of it, as the alpha version, I would say, is just completed. So give it a couple months, and then we will release the best practices to the public. And at that point, if anyone wants to contribute from here, you're more than welcome to. The goal of best practices is to have an open sourceness of reviews, so that anyone that wants to participate can. As you know, as great as audits are, they're highly centralized by the auditing firms, and it's really tough for new developers to get experience in the space. So just keep an eye out. You can follow me on Twitter, and I will post updates for the best practices as they come along. So there's my Twitter. Give me a follow. I'll follow you guys back. But so yes, auditing and reviewing code and best practices is extremely important. Can I explain more about the kernel? I think they're just for crowdsourced bounty programs. Yeah, sure. So Gitcoin kernel. So the way Gitcoin kernel works is there are several different tracks that you can take, whether it's security, whether it's DeFi or stuff like that. It's all over when it comes to Web3 development. And so people that join either have a project they're already working on already, or are looking to join a team, or are even just looking to build their network when it comes to Web3. As everything's been so remote lately, it's been very hard to expand networks digitally. It's like a lot of forced networking. And so the way Gitcoin kernel works is each week you have several different presentations for each track. And with those presentations, they're mostly hands-off lectures. And so you can learn more about the technicalities of whatever track you want to get involved with. And so with best practices, we're engaging, we're trying to get the kernel more engaging, as what we've kind of realized is it's a lot of content, but not a lot of application. And so being able to apply, what you learn in these sessions to actual projects will be very helpful. So does that answer your question, Shawshank? Yep. Cool. Awesome. Yeah. Glad to answer that question. If anyone else has questions, feel free to just post in the chat. I'll be happy to answer as I can. Let's make sure everything looks good here. So connectivity is good. All right. Boom, boom. Okay. So you guys can see my screen. Great. So what we'll do is we will go through Immunefi's website, pick one of the cheaper bounties out there to see if there's anything we can find, and then just start attacking it. So actually, we could probably just sort it by low to high. Okay, so we've got a ton of here stuff. Am I able to filter by all bounties? Immunify only. Okay. All right, so we have a ton of different choices. I'll just pick a couple and let you guys vote on them, and we'll go from there. Will I select the fresh bounty? You don't know yet? Yeah. So I haven't actually looked at any of these bounties, Kevin. So there's no, I'm not coming into these with any experience. It's not like I'm just going to talk through it. This will be my exact exploration process on it. So yeah. And just to give you guys a little bit info on what I use Visual Studio Code for all of my development. So what I really like using is there's a Solidity Visual Developer extension out there by consensus where you can explore contracts and how they're viewed. I'm just going to kind of talk through some of the things that I use when it comes to this testing. So I like ETH Hover. What it does is you can hover over addresses to see where they are on mainnet, and you can disassemble, and etc. So you can look at contracts just from your editor, which is great. So why does it only? Oh, there we go. Okay. So that one's great. MythX is a great one for compiling code as well. The Solidity Contract Flattener, which is nice. So when you have a lot of imports like OpenZeppelin, being able to flatten Solidity contracts are great so that it can essentially have all of the OpenZeppelin imports in one contract. So if you're trying to test on Remix or locally, and you don't want to have to fetch those contracts each time online, you can flatten them, and it helps for some debugging. Solidity language, just to give language support. And then last but not least is the Solidity Visual Developer, which I love. And with this, it adds an extra layer of coloring onto code, which you're able to match when it comes to variables versus constants versus parameters, etc. And so, for example, this is one of the projects I'm working on. If I'm just to click on one. So when it comes to like variables that you declare, you have this box around them, which you can end up finding around when it comes to the code. And then passing in parameters, you have this coloring, which I should probably make this white to make it a little bit easier if you. Cool. So, and then when it comes to these parameters that you pass in, the visual developer functionality allows you to see where it is. And if you were to have a variable that, say you forgot to have an underscore for it, you'll get some highlighting of, some problem. So undeclared identifier, do you mean deposit amount? Yes. So just a very helpful tool when it comes to Solidity development, as there are a lot of small gotchas that missing some, or poorly naming a variable name can sometimes be missed. And so being able to catch those as they come, or something like missing a semicolon will end up showing that it expected it. So yeah, just some of my favorite extensions to use when it comes to Visual Studio Code. I really love these tools. And they're in my daily usage. So let's see if there's any questions. Can we review DeFi Saver smart contracts? Sure, let's do that. Paul, thanks for asking. I was going to make a poll, but you're the first one to it, so let's do it. Okay, so it's a management application. Managing your debt positions with leveraging and deleveraging, and automated position management, moving your position between protocols, earning interest, swapping tokens. It's used for managing leverage positions. Cool. So before we get any of their code, look at any of their code, I want to review their website and check everything out. Okay. Let's see if we can find these deployed contracts. 47D. No, okay. Also, something I'm already liking from the start is how they have all of these deployed contracts available for you to see, whether it's these mainnet addresses here or from the bug bounty. When it comes to reviewing projects, sometimes it's a lot harder to find where your deployed contracts are. And so I'm already really liking this, as it'll be a lot easier to look at all of these target contracts and see what is missing. So any questions so far? Pro tip, mouse middle button. Oh, nice. Thank you. That's actually pretty helpful. Saves me a click. Okay, so let's just do the welcome first. Okay, so I'm just looking at this new recipe stuff. Automate's coming soon. Okay, let's see some stats. Actually, let's check their blog. I want to see what they've done recently. Maybe something they've done recently needs to get some review. The recipe creator. Actually, I think this security audit summary will be helpful, as well as recently discovered vulnerabilities. One in 2020. Cool. So just kind of exploring their website and their blog, it looks like they've had some audits and bug reports already. So it'll be helpful to review those to see kind of if there's any commonalities between them. So that way we can kind of figure out what to focus on. So yeah, being able to just navigate their website and announcements is helpful. So you actually have some context when it comes to reviewing. So any more context. Deployed contracts are not given. Well, if deployed contracts are not given, what we would do is just look at the GitHub that they would have provided. Maybe for another project, they won't be in scope. So let's see if I just click on written. Well, I don't know. I would assume that they would have their contracts live. Well, here we go. This Goose DeFi. Okay. It's on mainnet. Yeah, ultimately, if they don't have mainnet addresses, that's fine. You can just review the GitHub, but, you're kind of just trusting that those GitHub commits are up to date. When it comes to projects I reviewed, some of them have outdated documentation or outdated code where the commits don't match the actual live code. And so what I would probably recommend if it comes to reviewing a project that you don't know if their contracts are live or not is reaching out to the team as they're paying out a bounty. I'm sure they would be helpful to provide that information. Do I use the mainnet or testnet? Do I use mainnet or testing for the audit or bug hunting activities? Really just depends on what people give you. Whatever contracts are deployed are the ones you want to test. Checking latest GitHub commits, yes. It's important as something I like to try to see is if the team has contracts that their deployed contracts are on a specific commit. That way you're able to tie that commit to those contracts. Otherwise you might have that kind of problem of the code, the GitHub repositories being out of date. Yep. Blogs, GitHub commits, community chats, easy way to recon. When it comes to testing, I love using Hardhat. So back when I started in 2018, when it comes to Solidity, I started with Truffle, and honestly, the plug-and-play functionality of Hardhat and the usage makes it extremely easy to use once you get familiar with it. The functionality is essentially endless, which I guess is kind of the same for Truffle, but I don't know, Hardhat's just newer, and it's kind of like the gold standard now when it comes to testing and deployment. So will I use it today? It would be pretty cool. Sure. Yeah, we can use it today. Maybe the DeFi Saver has some hard hat tests, so we can check that out. So let's go back to DeFi Saver. Great. So we have their website, and actually, before we get anything going, let's check their Gitter. Oh, I guess it's GitHub, not Gitter. Uh-oh. Okay, well, looks like their Discord doesn't have any additional information that we can really take other than just like kind of new announcements. So migration from V1 to V2, deprecating V1 on June 1st. So this might be something interesting to actually check out, is viewing Aave V1 and seeing what that migrating looks like. And there's anything that we could look at there. So let's see, any more questions right now? Nope. Okay. Great. So let's look at these blog posts, see what the audit looks like. So what we'll probably do is look at things that have been deployed since this audit, as that I would say is probably a higher chance of finding things that are broken. So they have 10,000 lines of code. Security model. Can downstream. No possibility. Future evolution of the code base, threats that we should be aware of, authorization of specific code via reentrancy, Okay, that's something easy to look for when it comes to reentrancy management. Open Zeppelin has a pretty cool tool. Uh-oh. I thought it was under security. Oh, now we got it. Okay. Yeah, so this reentrancy guard, you have a non-reentrant modifier, which you can add to functions to essentially have a check that if a function is called twice, that the second time it won't work. So it's a way to, it's a very simple way to protect against reentrancy. Cool. So yeah, Complify, they use hard hat. Yes, we're not going to be disclosing any exploits on stream. So if you guys find something, are they bulletproof? I haven't seen any arguments against non-reentrancy, and I've seen it used on several contracts with billions of dollars of TVL. Like, can there be any misconfigured uses? Not necessarily misconfigured, but you may be using non-reentrancy when you don't necessarily need to. So reentrancy is a problem when you have external calls. So like if you're transferring funds, calling another contract, etc. That's where things can go wrong. So I would say the worst usage of the non-reentrant modifier is when it's not needed, and it's just kind of too much. And Solidity, like removing a explanation point, can deploy a contract. Yep. And that's the beauty of it, is as simple of a language Solidity kind of is, it's actually very technical. So let's see what this looks like real quick. Cool. Yeah, I already like how the testing on Complify looks, how they build it based on contracts. So yeah, they got a lot of tests, which is good. Something to note though, just because you have a lot of tests, it doesn't make a project any more secure, as tests only really are meant to show intended functionality, where exploits are unintended functionalities. So just something to bear in mind, quality of tests doesn't make a code base any more secure. So that's just my hot take on it. So yes. Now let's start looking at some of this stuff on the review, on this audit. Right, so this first bullet point of transfers of tokens are initiated externally. So that's something where you would need to have reentrancy protection. And then when it comes to proxy contracts, they can be manipulated when it comes to deploying a new proxy contract or destroying the original proxy. And so what would happen is if you destroy the original proxy contract, when you call your proxy, it doesn't know where to point at, and it's essentially broken. And that's how the parity wallet break back in the day happened, is someone got control of the master contract and they self-destructed the main proxy contract, which meant all of the smart wallets that used that proxy were essentially frozen. So yes, that's where proxies can be kind of dangerous. So just something to bear in mind. Authorization of code is attackable via reentrancy. Okay, so this first description of this vulnerability is an access control problem. And access control essentially means who is allowed to access which functions of a contract. And it is a huge thing to look for when it comes to looking at contracts, as if you're able to call a function that is only meant for an admin, that is an unintended functionality, and that, which is technically not a good thing. So something to look for is that access control, making sure every function is only callable by the contract or person that should have access to it. Admin auth. Gotcha. So this arbitrary users can call function. This bottom description is another access control thing where they just didn't have as many locks or controls on those calls. Let's see what some low thing are. Inconsistency. Cool. Any more questions from the team? So, nope. Great. I'll continue to check the chat for questions. So don't be afraid to put something on here, or if you want to speak, you're more than welcome to. I don't bite. Oh, we do have a question, I guess. Let's see. Would I approach contracts that use safe math open, that do not use safe math ownable, etc. by Open Zeppelin? Yes. It really just depends on the developer's style and usage. When it comes to safe math, the newer versions of Solidity since v0.8 have included arithmetic checks so that safe math isn't needed. And in my eyes, let's see what it looks like. Right, so arithmetic checks and overflows and underflows. And my personal opinion on safe math is that you really shouldn't need it any longer unless you're depending on external contracts that still use it. It's really not required anymore. So adding all of the imports of the safe math library, just makes it a little bit more complex and you don't necessarily need it. Yeah, I guess my kind of thoughts on that is if a contract uses safe math when it doesn't need to, because it's not using other contracts that use safe math, I would question the quality of the code, as there'd be no real reasoning behind it. And so that would be something good to look out for, is if they use safe math when they don't need to. What is another question? Yep. When it comes to ownable, it really isn't that hard to do your own version of ownable. It is nice using Open Zeppelins. So it really just depends on the style of the developer. They typically really like Open Zeppelin, or they do it all from scratch. So yeah, I don't really think one way or the other than the whole safe math issue. When it comes to complex mathematical and economical formulas, something that I've always been an advocate of is handwriting. And especially when it comes to some contracts that still use safe math, and they have a bunch of chained methods together, like an adding and then multiplying and then subtracting. If I just grab a piece of paper and try to write that down as a function, I'm able to view it. Because with safe math, it's based on each decimal add and then its decimal sub. So it really doesn't. It takes it by the line. It takes it from front to back when you read that code, rather than order of operations. So yeah, just being able to visualize it and write it down gives me some help with internalizing functions. So okay. Overall, it looks like with this review, we'll be dealing with a lot of safe math stuff. And then we should also probably look for some access control as well as external calls, is what I'm taking from this audit. So let's see what this looks like. Static analysis. Okay, so it looks like a reentrancy problem with transfer from. And this is where something like adding a simple modifier of non-reentrant would be very helpful. It's something as simple as that to prevent it. Oh yeah, I have the questions in a pop-out now. Do I? Where are they? Let me stop sharing real quick, see if I can get this. Cool, we got some more questions. Yes, it will be uploaded to YouTube. So you guys, if you have other obligations, you're more welcome to head out and catch up to the recording. Personally, I would rather have you guys here so you can ask questions live rather than watching a recording. Most common types of vulnerabilities. Reentrancy is really common. The access controls are very common. That's what I see a lot of. It used to be a lot of liquidity problems and being able to manipulate pools with flash loans to adjust it, like the current pricing. But since we've seen so many exploits of flash loans to manipulate those prices, people have figured out that you need to have price derived over time and not just by the current liquidity of the pool. And so while we saw a bunch of exploits last year related to flash loans, we've since kind of seen those go away as we've seen tools like time-weighted average price. Uniswap has a functionality of it. So with a time-weighted average price, you're looking at two different prices based on two different blocks. And so even if you manipulate the current block, you're still using the price of the last block. So a flash loan, it's resistant to flash loan manipulation. So yeah, these problems aren't nearly as common as they used to be, which is great. Let's see. Selecting a target, I don't know where to start. A bounty program is new to me. Do you jump on the latest developments? If I land on a new project with a fresh GitHub repo in front of you, what would you start with? I mean, so the way that I've kind of started it so far is reviewing on public announcements and seeing what public information we can check that is shared that could be relevant to what we're looking at. So figuring out where to start, it's really just taking it step by step, and rather than trying to look at everything as a whole, which can be very complicated. I'll kind of show you guys the process that I've done. So after we kind of review all of these announcements, what I'll like to do is go through testing to see what the tests say, as that'll give us that narrative as how we expect DeFi Saver to work. My approach from deploying the testing. So the way I test contracts is if I'm like having a mock contract that acts like a regular contract. In testing versus deployment, I have them work in the same way that they would on a deployed contract, just with different functionality on the internals. So I hope that makes sense. We'll kind of go with it. We'll kind of go into depth with that as we go along. Cool. So that looks good. Let's see what this vulnerability. So some front running by arbitrage bots. Let's Cool. So it looks like we'll be looking at smart contracts to interact with the protocol, which are only callable by the owner, which is good to know. So that's good. Okay. Any more questions right now? What's the difference between reentrancy and race condition attacks? Can you explain race condition attacks, please? While you type that out, I'll get this repository local and see what it looks like. We have 18 attendees, Kevin. Hey guys, sorry about that. Internet just kind of cut out. So, Jonah, are we going to take the break now for 30 minutes? Is that what you want to do?
Break for 30 minutes now and then come back and get started again.
Cool. Well, I guess that works out well. If anyone has any questions up to this point, please ask them. We'll get going in 30 minutes. Talk to you all soon. Hey, Kevin. Hey, everyone. Welcome back. Hope you all had a wonderful break. Let's get this going. I'll wait just a minute so anyone that is taking their break can come back, and then we'll start getting down to the dirty. Before we get going, something I realized that I hadn't covered is some analysis tools. And there are some automated tools out there already that you guys can use that allow for looking for very common issues that can arise. What I mean by that, I'll give a really good example. Hang on. Okay. Cool. There we go. So something that I use quite often is called Slither. And Slither is a awesome tool for analyzing solidity. And I don't want to run this on the current code base because if we find anything, that would be a big problem live. But so what you can do, what I had mentioned before about flattening contracts, so it's all in one contract, that's something that they allow you to do as well. But really what Slither does is it does all of these different checks. And all of these different checks, I have different kind of severities, whether it's the wrong interfaces, dangerous uses of transaction origin, which we haven't really seen in a while. No one really uses transaction origin anymore. Missing events, redundant statements, etc. So I'll shoot this into the chat for everyone. And when it comes to using Slither, it's extremely easy. So all you have to do is run it on a single file or all of your contracts. And it's as simple as pip3 installing Slither Analyzer and then running Slither on your contract. So if you want to do that on this code base or others, these are all of the different detections that Slither does. So really awesome tool to use to kind of give you some ideas on if there's anything that could immediately break. And one of the common usages of Slither is for reentrancy. So checking of reentrancy. So yes, this is an awesome tool for anyone that does penetration testing and Solidity. So yeah, hope you guys enjoy that. Great. And what I thought I found before where the docs was broken was really just my internet. So yeah, let's see this diagram. Okay, well, this is going to be quite complicated, which is all right. So what I think we'll do is review the tests quickly and then look at the newest deployments of code since the audit. Uniswap wrapper v3. Okay, cool. Let's make sure we got everything. And I'll share the link to this repo as well. Dynamic, yeah, so so here are a lot of different static and dynamic analysis tools offered through Consensus Diligence or similar auditing firms. So this is a pretty good resource to use to check for those. Open oracles, that's a good question when it comes to oracles. I'm not entirely sure. Let's see. It doesn't look like Slither does anything when it comes to oracles, so I guess that's something to keep in mind with all of the exploits we've seen in the past year or so. So any more questions? Nope. Okay, great. Guides and tutorials. Looks like we have an audit from Consensus too. Great. Great. So the security spec, this is like the access control that I had mentioned before when it comes to actors. So it looks like the actors that we have are an owner, an admin, and a user. So it looks like admin only has one use, owner can swap. Okay, remove wrapper contracts. Changing proxies. Trust model, let's see. Looks like there's a lot of trust given to the owner here that the owner can swap contracts in the registry where you have a wait period, that the wait period could be 0. So those could be changed immediately. Yeah, so it looks like there's a lot of trust there. Uses call data to execute. Yeah, so this trust model, this third bullet point of the trust model having the no allow list, where you essentially have a green listed set of contracts. I think it's extremely valuable as people can create their own malicious ERC20s to have functionality that's unintended. Like you're able to lock up your token as collateral as a liquidity provider, but you're not able to unlock, or you're able to buy a token in ERC20, but you're not able to sell it. So there are a lot of gotchas like that non-technical people may not exactly find. So a good example on what I mean. And this is kind of a common practice, is having a list of curated tokens that people can use. So for example, on Uniswap, they have this managed token lists, which on these token lists are the kind of green listed tokens that you can trade, so that you can trust that the tokens you're using are not those malicious contracts that I said before. If they're impersonating another contract, we've seen where when contracts go live that have a lot of hype, that malicious actors will deploy contracts with a similar name on Uniswap, hoping to lure in some apes. So yes, the way that these work are through ENS. So let's see, view list. Great. So I really like this standard, and I think it should be used more. And it's essentially, it uses the Ethereum naming service to give an easy URL to have approved contracts. So just a very good tool to use when it comes to your own. And you're able to actually utilize these curated lists for your own projects if you'd like. So let's see. I'll share this with you guys. Oh yeah, there is Harvey as well. I don't know if it's actually usable. I'm not too sure about Harvey, my friend. Anyway, let's review this audit. Okay, so this big crit is about adding a reentrancy guard, which is simple as adding that non-reentrant. So examples. Tokens with more than 18 decimal points will cause issues. So this is a great example of having the list of curated tokens that I showed that Uniswap has done, so that you're able to make sure that the tokens included are all up to the standards that your protocol uses. So kind of interesting here, it's a problem with safe math, that safe math reverts when tokens have more than 18 decimals. And where YAM has 24 decimals, the safe math would revert. So this is also a great example of why safe math can actually cause problems rather than actually help you. And so just something to keep in mind that, safe math has its own things to be wary of that you may not necessarily be aware of. Functions, return error code. Okay. First order of parameters. Full test suite is pending. Okay, well, it looks like those are all of the major ones. Well, actually, let's look at the minor stuff too, because minor problems are also problems in themselves. Missing checks. Unused code. Return values. Not used. Okay. Return values more. Access control. Code duplication and stuff like that. And this is just unchecked safe math. Cool. Any other questions right now? Nope. Great. Cool. So went through the two audits. We've gone through all of their announcements of past vulnerabilities that people have found. I've showed you guys token security lists and using Slither for static analysis, as well as some dynamic analysis tools that Consensus offers. So let's kind of dive more into this stuff. Actually, what I think we should do is, since we discussed looking at new changes, what we'll do is focus specifically on their most recent announcements and look at that code, especially when it comes to testing and stuff. So DeFi saver. Is it just blog? Okay, recipe creator. Great. Let's just double check this. Cool. All right, so this recipe creator. You can do various DeFi logos. And the concept is here. This reminds me a lot of Furu Combo, if you guys have heard of. They had an exploit a couple months back, but they essentially have something similar where you can like drag and drop different functionality or different transactions and create flash loans and stuff like this with as easy as an interface versus anything on the back end. So and simulation mode, NFTs, upgrades. Cool. Okay. So that looks good. And then one last thing is this last newsletter. Is that the last newsletter? Oh, shit. Where are we? Here we are. Reflexor dashboard was recently released, so I think we need to look at that as well. And Aave v2. Okay. Well, it sounds like the code on the recipe maker has all been audited, so that'll be the kind of second priority. It sounds like this whole the Reflexor dashboard hasn't been audited, so that's what we'll focus on primarily. Cool. Great. All right. Let's exit this stuff. Ethereum node URL. Okay. Let's see what this looks like in the environment. Okay, I'm going to edit all this stuff real quick, and we'll get right back to it. I don't want to share my screen for this, but actually I could probably share some of it. So when it comes to testing and which nodes to use, it's alchemy.com, cool. So I like using Alchemy for my Ethereum node. There's also Infura, but there's kind of less rate limiting when it comes to Alchemy. And what you can use Alchemy for is hard forking from mainnet. So one of the cool things when it comes to testing is you don't want to have to deploy your contracts every time you test. Like imagine you're testing with Uniswap and you want to simulate some Uniswap transactions. When it comes to testing, you don't want to have to deploy the router, make a liquidity pair, provide liquidity, and all that jazz just to test it. That's a lot of redundant code. So what you can use are these node services like Alchemy to hard fork from mainnet And so you can start your tests from a specific block. And what that allows is using tests to interact with already deployed contracts in the state that they were in. So hard hats. This is what it looks like is forking from mainnet. So hard hat node, Infura. Okay, so hard hat node does it specifically where it's on your local environment altogether. Yeah, Kevin, I can share those plugins. But so in terms of these difference in nodes, the hard hat node is specifically for testing locally on a clean Ethereum node. So you're not forking from mainnet, where using Infura and Alchemy nodes can cache the state of mainnet. And so when you test locally, you can fetch that information and use that for your tests. Yeah, in terms of this, I'll share the extensions real quick. Mm-hmm. It should just be an easy link to. Cool. There you go. And then let's see if there's anything else that I would like to add. So that extension that I gave you guys also gives some of the other extensions as well, like MythX and so forth, ETH Hover. I'll include MythX as well. Yeah, I mean, I'll just include the, well, I guess you can find the Solidity extension as it is. That's enough for now. Great. Yeah, of course, Kevin. Okay, so my Ethereum node will be using Alchemy. Cool. So added the Alchemy one. Now for Etherscan API, it works kind of the same. So with this, I'm going to stop sharing real quick. And then for mainnet private key, just to be safe, I'm going to export the private key of a newly generated address from my MetaMask. And I'll show you guys what that looks like so you can do that as well. So what you do, you just go on MetaMask, creating your account. Let's label this DeFi saver. Create. What you can then do is export your private key. So account details, export private key. You guys can copy that. I don't care. There's no funds on this. Let me stop sharing to finish editing my minute. Cool. Great. So we have our environment done. So this NPX hard hat node is just telling it hard hat which node to use. Something I also like is this markdown viewer to convert markdown in your editor to PDF. Okay. Okay, so while that's loading, let's look at the tests, see what we got. Okay, we got a bunch. So let's look at specifically Reflexor. So these are utils. Okay. Come to generating, let's see. You deploy all these contracts. Okay, getting the address. Generating RAI for be safe. Logging every event. Okay, Reflexor open. Payback, this is looking like payback. Buying these from proxy and moving from safe. Logging every event, and then this will be withdrawing. And logging every event. Cool. Oops. Actually, probably could just put it. Uh-oh. This is kind of frustrating already that the tests aren't working, but that's all right. That's part of the fun. Absolutely. All right, let me check my environment and make sure that I added everything as I should have, but I don't want you guys to see that. Cool. See what it looks like now. Nice. That's cool. Let's see if this just works. GX hardhat test. Okay. Meanwhile, let's look at the deployments stuff. Okay. That's cool. Commands run deploy versus run test. Yeah, that's registry. Contract one. Ethers of undefined. Let's just try taking out the first HRE. I don't know why there'd be two. Okay, well, looks like that's doing something good. So well, it's looking like a lot of these tests are failing, which is great. Oh, Let's actually submit a pull request on that. Test. Weird. Why isn't it showing the... Huh. This is the repo of DeFi Saber V3 contracts. We're doing test core TF registry. Cool. I guess I didn't even need to fork it. Cool. Well, either way, it looks like we're able to contribute to their repository, which is cool. Cool. Oh, these reflexor contracts are what we're going to explore. Well, we've seen before that we've had problems when it comes to having interfaces correct. So let's compare these interfaces to what Reflexor has. Let's see if they have join. Okay, looks like they've got collateral type. I don't see collateral though. Interesting. Actually, I should probably just clone this repository local. Okay, well, I'm just going to keep looking around. It doesn't really look like that makes sense. Cool. So it looks like checking out these interfaces would be something good for you guys to do. Make sure everything looks like it's up to date and used. Any more questions at this point? Nope. Okay. So honestly, a good method of attacking contracts when they're already audited is to look at the vulnerabilities that were mentioned, as you'll probably have the same developers. It's, you might see some commonalities when it comes to new code. So, yeah. Cool. So now it looks like we've got all these tests. Message sender is not owner. It looks like the common problem, which I'm guessing is why they wanted us to run that initial. Yep. Well, it looks like those are the only errors. And just to make sure we can't do this. Probably the same thing. JSON, RPC. Let me try editing my environment real quick. I have HTTPS. Maybe just changing it to the non-secure HTTP could make the difference. Negative. Okay, well, that's all right. But something good to notice is that your test should be working. So when people are trying to do bug bounties like us, we can make sure everything looks as it should. Okay, so we've got generating, open. I don't know why It's not showing the tabs. No. Whatever. Maybe. Oh. Okay. So what I mentioned before, things that we're going to look for are reentrancy and access control. And let's just go through these and see where functions are called and if the correct access control is done. So this execute action. Looks like anyone can call it. Safe ID. Where's this reflection generate? Okay, so something I'm looking at when it comes to this safe manager and safes versus collateral type is I would be interested to see if the safe manager has a curated list of safes and collateral types. As I had mentioned before with the whole Uniswap having their ENS curated domains, perhaps this could be something that we need to target. So where's our safe manager? Okay, so it's probably from one of these two. Actually, probably just look at one contract at a time. Okay, so it's from Reflexor Helper. The interface safe manager. My safe manager. Okay, it looks like this safe manager is from Reflexor themselves. Well, types unsafe. Oops. Okay, so safe manager. Do I already understand the contract? Will I prove the program in addition to test specific threats? I'm not really too worried about it right now. Their testing could be improved, and it's really not too much of a priority. It's just to give me a better understanding of how everything works. That could be something I would do after looking for these commonalities that we've seen in the past. So we might be able to explore that at the end. It just depends. Do I already understand the contract, or do I analyze them what I see? Right now, I'm really only analyzing what I see. When it comes to looking at other people's code, it takes a little bit of time to get familiar with their variable naming conventions, their structure and style of code, etc. And so right now, I'm just getting familiar with how everything looks, and then we can kind of talk more about how everything would operate. And what I want to do after looking briefly over these contracts is double check that they look the exact same with the contracts that are live. Actually, we probably should do that first. Aave basic proxy. Again, we're looking for the reflexor stuff right now. Compound. Oops. Well, time for me to delete that API key real quick and enter scan. Silly me. Am I in it for the tech? Yes, 100%, Paul. When I got into crypto, my original perspective on it was of trading, and I built some pretty cool trading algorithms. So I made this public project called TA Charts. I'll just show you guys that real quick. So when I first got deep into crypto, I made this TA Charts, which allows a bunch of functionality that a technical analysis trader would use. And I optimized it with the NumPy library over pandas. And so I was really deep into trading for a while, which is a negative sum game, as we know. And in 2019, I had some really heavy losses, and I had to step back for a second and question why I was in Ethereum in the first place. And it was at that point I realized it wasn't really to make money, but just the innovativeness of it. And so from 2019, I shifted more from a trader's perspective to a builder's perspective, which is now why I developed for a couple of different dApps, and I'm doing stuff like today. Like I'm in no way getting paid or sponsored by Immunefi to contribute to this and to do this live coding session today. I just really care about it, and I'm happy to give back when I can. So yes, I am entirely in it for the technology. MakerDAO subscriptions, Proxy Monitor. Okay. Let's see if I can just run npm run test. Let's see if that'll work. Oh, it doesn't exist. Oh, network test file. Yeah, so it looks like we're still gonna have problems with that, which is great. Okay. So let's look at more reflexor stuff, checking access control. Looks like anyone can access these. Executing actions, call data, subdata, param mapping. Parse inputs, call data. Let's see what parse inputs looks like. Okay. So you're passing in an array of bytes, which would be the call data. Okay. That makes sense. Amount into subdata. I'm guessing this is from the helpers. Safe engine address. Well, these look like some contracts that we can actually look on online on mainnet to check. Oh, I guess I could have just done it from here. I always forget. Okay, there's one, and then there's two. Okay, it looks like this is maker stuff. Is the other one as well? Don't look like it. Safe. Okay, well, I'm going to look at. I don't need to save that one. I trust Maker enough right now that I wouldn't expect too many problems. So, where with this safe engine, I'm not too entirely sure what everything looks like. Add authorization, remove authorization, is authorized. Approve, safe modification in. Where are safe rights at? Oh, right here. Who can transfer collateral in and out? Okay, well, there's no access control on this, but it looks like the only person that can give safe rights is based on the message sender. So the message sender would have to approve the safe modification. So it looks like that isn't too much of a problem. Denying safe modification. Something that I would note here that you guys may want to do for your own common practices is preventing approval of the same thing twice. And what I mean by that is I could essentially call this function on the same account twice and set it to 1 both times, which wouldn't change anything, but it would we would have the same event emitted twice, which wouldn't necessarily make much sense. So what I would do here is add something like I would add something like this. So that way approving a safe modification would only work when something is not approved. And the same when it comes to denying. So either. What is this function? Huh. That's cool. We got some assembly. Any more questions at this point? Yeah, so in terms of the complex environment setups, like that's where you don't need to worry. You know, in the context of this project, we weren't able to immediately get the test to work. And while it could be intimidating, we're still able to dig through this code and figure out what works and doesn't work. And no, I did not hear about this with value DeFi. This initialized equals true. Kind of an interesting thing about that is OpenZeppelin has functionality to manage initialized. So the way that initialized works is that you can use it to create contracts super easily and make sure that once they're initialized, you can't call initialize a second time. So, and this comes in terms of proxy contracts. So once your proxy contract is initialized, you should not be able to initialize it again, as it works in the same way as a constructor function, except it is callable at a different time, which all you have to do is use this initializer modifier on your initialized function. What I mean by that is so this is a common practice when it comes to upgradable contracts, is having this function of initialize and then setting initialize to true so that you can't call it twice. And this comes back to the question someone had asked me earlier on viewing contracts that do or don't have OpenZeppelin. In terms of this, it makes contracts a little bit more concise, as rather than having to make sure that you set initialize to true, you can use the OpenZeppelin initializable SDK to add that initializer modifier. and this will take care of setting an initialized variable to true, so that you don't have to worry about that. So that's how that works. The attacker reinitialized the contract. Well, this is a great example on contracts that could be using Open Zeppelin but don't, may be missing that simple gotcha of initializing a contract. So yeah, I'm glad I did not ape into that project. Oh, let's see. This safe engine, right? So that is Reflexor. Okay, cool. Oh, and this is Oh, I guess this is Reflexor as well, even though it started with Maker. So we can review that one as well. Safe, get safe manager. Let's try that. Okay, so it's not in the repo. That's all right. How did we find this contract? Something I'd be wary of when it comes to these deployed contracts is it doesn't have the commit that they're tied to. So you'd have to verify that these contracts deployed are the same ones that we're reviewing. But in terms of this bug bounty, I'd rather just focus on the contracts they've given us and look at those. Any more questions at this point? No. Monitor proxy. If this is all MakerDAO stuff, then I'd rather. Well, I guess assets are in scope or relevant. Well, wait a second. It's also this repository, so we'll just stick to the repository and keep reviewing this fun stuff. So I would think that just off the top of my head, thinking of what could cause problems is maybe paying back, supplying, or withdrawing. With open, it's hard to imagine opening something could cause problems, opening an empty safe. Adapter address by parsing inputs. Oh, something to note when it comes to these contracts is this NatSpec documentation. NatSpec's the gold standard when it comes to documenting Solidity code, and I would recommend it without a doubt for any developers out there writing their own code. And what NatSpec does is it's a standard of defining how functions, contracts, etc., variables are defined, and you have all of these different tags that you can use, which these tags also allow it so that when you generate your JSON files from compiling, you also get this documentation. So when you create the contract ABI, you're able to add additional information to your code to give users or developers more context on your variables and so forth. So for example, your parameters, you can now describe, it'll automatically format so you can describe these rings or other variables. But so why I wanted to kind of point this out is that this inherit doc means that you're inheriting from the base contracts. So in terms of what this looks like here, when we're inheriting the action base, what that means is that these functions should be the exact same as the parameters in this function should be the exact same as the action base. So, and this is just something really easy to check because we're just looking in action base. Okay, cool. So it looks like from this inherit doc, their execute action, they have bytes memory call data, subdata, param mapping, return values, public payable, virtual returns. So this is override, which essentially means that you have this interface of this action base, and our contract here on the left will override this function so that these this internal code is executed. So it's a good way to modularize your code so that rather than having all of your code and documentation in the same exact file, which can take up a ton of space, as if you look on the right, the documentation of execute action is 6-7 lines. You can have that separated to your interfaces or inherited contracts, leaving your code to be a little bit easier to read without as much in one file. So just kind of a thing to note. That's something that I've been using as well. It is a great practice to have, as for someone like us, rather than having to look through it all, we can just look back and just double check everything. So action base, execute action direct, public payable versus public override. That looks good. Action type looks the same. Action logic. Oh, well, here's something I've noticed already is that when it comes to the action logic, they're missing a NatSpec of returns. So you would have a return amount. This would be what amount generated. So that was a very easy find of some NatSpec that they were missing. So and actually, we could just probably do another pull request on that as well. I'll do that after the call, so you guys don't have to watch me do another. Or if someone else would like to, yeah, actually, I'm going to be lazy and not do it. If you'd like to contribute to Reflexor's project, what we can do, this is Reflexor generate.sol. No. actions reflexor. Great. So if anyone would like to do a pull request to add the NAT spec on returns, that's where you go. May the best one win. Personally, if I find something as easy as just adding a NAT spec comment, might as well contribute to it. Make the space a little bit better. So great. So we found some NAT spec problems. Interesting. This delta debt could be negative, which I'd be worried about, or positive. If that, let's combine return delta. Okay, so we looked at the generating. Let's look at withdrawing, because withdrawing could cause some problems. We only have 10 minutes left, so actually, if anything, I'd rather open this up to Q&A for people to ask. Now would be a great time while we've got 10 minutes left to answer any questions that you guys have. So I'll actually open up these last 10 minutes for anyone here. Now's the time we can just talk about any ideas that you guys have, suggestions, etc. Did I already find bug bounties on either Immunefi or somewhere else? I have not. To be quite honest, I haven't really spent more than a couple hours on bug bounties. A couple of weeks ago, I worked with a friend to look at Badger Finance's bug bounties on Immunefi, as they were really substantial. But something I've come to realize is that the larger the bounty, the more complicated they can get. And so honestly, targeting something like today that was, kind of in the middle range was definitely extremely complicated. But we were able to, find a few small problems that, weren't breaking, but, just inconsistencies. So I have not yet reported a bug bounty, but it doesn't stop me from looking at code and deciphering it. So do I lose motivation to analyze? What gets you back? Shashank, thanks for the best of luck. And for Kevin, I guess it's really easy to lose motivation when it comes to this stuff. I always find that working with other people makes it a lot more enjoyable, as you can kind of bounce ideas back and forth. Trying to talk through code with one another gives two perspectives instead of one. And in that case, two minds together is more powerful than two minds separately. So what I would just recommend is finding a friend that wants to look at this stuff with you. And, maybe every couple of weeks, you guys just dedicate a couple hours like I did today to do something like this. And to be quite honest, now that I've realized how easy it is to go through this with explaining it to everyone, I probably will be looking to spend more time on this in the future when I have the availability. So have I tried searching gas theft on centralized exchanges through directly or ERC-22? No, I have not looked at gas theft, and I haven't heard of ERC-223, so I'm interested to see what it is. It's Well, I guess to be quite frank, I haven't heard of ERC 223, so I definitely have not am not familiar with that part. So. Yeah, of course, Kevin. In terms of the idea of doing this work today, it was inspired through the best practicers group. As people in the best practicers wanted to review another project. And since we are waiting until the kickoff of the next kernel to review projects, I wanted to do something fun in the interim to get people more involved in being able to token fallback. Right. Yeah, honestly, part of the fun is being able to give you guys the resources that I have available and being able to kind of leapfrog a lot of the problems and kind of scary, intimidating things that may be preventing you from looking for bounties. I definitely would recommend it through minting. Future vision on DeFi safety. So that's a great question. And I guess when it comes to DeFi safety, Immunefi's had a really interesting approach of having these larger than normal bug bounties as you need to motivate white hat hackers more than the black hat to exploit protocols. And so, one of the things of the future is, offering better payouts like Immunefi does so that you get more participation on bug bounties like we did today. Another vision that I kind of have when it comes to the best practicers is decentralizing DeFi security and having it continuous when it comes to protocols. As we're starting to see with standards like the diamond standard of upgradability or proxy contracts, where you may upgrade the proxy, contracts that may have been, or even just upgrading to a new version like how Uniswap is now v3. All of these changes require additional reviews on code, which if you're trying to get audited, waiting a couple months between each audit to release your code base could be really slow you down. And so another thing that I'm kind of viewing of when it comes to DeFi security is that the larger protocols would have an in-house team of security specialists to review contracts in the interim before they're deployed. Similarly, having a continuous relationship with auditing firms if possible, so that you can get your code continuously upgraded, as Aave does have a continuous partnership with Consensus so that their code can be reviewed as it goes along, I think is extremely crucial. But and another thing with DeFi security is more decentralization, right? Auditing firms right now are very specialized, and it's to become an auditor, there's not really an easy way to do so. It's either like you are or are not. And so I'm kind of expecting DeFi security to also have more of a gray area where you can get more participation from people that may not necessarily be professionals, but it doesn't mean that they can't find missing parts of code that make a difference. So kind of a long-winded answer, but very excited for DeFi security, as it's definitely been iterating in the past year or so already, and we'll probably see more as it comes along. Of course, guys. Again, don't be afraid to reach me if you have more questions. I'll share my Twitter again. You can ping me directly on there. I'm on Telegram. There you go. So if you guys have any feedback, questions, please ping me. I'm basically always online during the week. So yeah, happy to be of assistance.
Jump in. Thank you, Carl, so much for your time and giving back to the community and answering all the questions. This was fantastic. And thanks to the audience for great questions. Stay tuned. Maybe we'll do more of these and lots of other things to come. So I'm going to end the session now, and we'll see you guys soon.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.